Lewis Hamilton is heading back to Mercedes. Curious about the real reason for his return? Want to know the massive paycheck he'll be taking home? Interested in why Frederic Vasseur and Charles Leclerc were so outraged when they heard the news? Stay with us until the end. This video has all the answers you're looking for. Subscribe only if you want to stay updated with the latest breaking news about F1 races. The announcement landed with the force of a detonation, obliterating the usual rhythm of the Formula One news cycle and instantly dominating every conversation from the garages to the VIP suites. Lewis Hamilton, after a spell at Ferrari defined as much by political strain as by flashes of brilliance, was returning to Mercedes. The shock was total, not whispered through the paddock in the days before, not hinted at in cryptic interviews, but dropped without warning, engineered to take the air out of every other storyline. Within moments, team principals were on calls with their boards, journalists tore up prepared copy, and social media spun into overdrive, looping old images of Hamilton in silver alongside speculation about what this meant for the balance of power. In Maranello, the breakdown had been a slow burn. The partnership had started with fanfare, a signing announced with cinematic flair, vintage Ferraris gleaming under spotlights, promises of rewriting history. Yet beneath the surface, the adaptation curve was steep, and the tolerance for it proved short. The SF-25 was a machine built around years of development with Charles Leclerc, every characteristic, from its turn-in behavior to the way it generated peak grip, tailored to his driving fingerprints. Hamilton was expected to not only match those results but surpass them, and to do so in real time, under the scrutiny of a fanbase and leadership hungry for immediate vindication. The moment the fault line truly split came in the shadow of the Spanish Grand Prix. A race plagued by tire wear and strategy missteps left Hamilton mired in the midfield as Leclerc stood on the podium. In the closed-off quiet of the team's private suite, Frederic Vasseur, his voice calm but lined with an unmistakable edge, delivered the remark that would mark a turning point. "It cannot be that Charles is on the podium and you are outside the points." The words landed without context or concession. No mention of the outdated aerodynamic components Hamilton had run that weekend, no acknowledgement of the time lost in pit lane. It was a statement of dissatisfaction, not a dialogue. Subscribe only if you want to stay updated with the latest breaking news about F1 races. From that day forward, his engagement with the team shifted. He no longer drove broader discussions in engineering briefings, limiting his contributions to targeted technical points. The easy camaraderie with mechanics and engineers that had once filled downtime was replaced with a cooler, more deliberate professionalism. Away from the paddock, conversations with confidants became more strategic in tone, focused less on adaptation and more on the feasibility of a move. The idea of staying was losing weight, the idea of leaving was gaining momentum. In Brackley, the signals were read and understood. Toto Wolff had maintained a thread of contact since Hamilton's departure, never intrusive but always present. What began as polite nods during race weekends evolved into extended, quieter conversations about team philosophy, resource allocation, and the long game of returning Mercedes to championship contention. The contrast between environments was stark, and Hamilton didn't need a sales pitch. The possibilities spoke for themselves. When the talks became formal, the operation ran like a clandestine mission. Meetings were staged in neutral locations with security and privacy in mind. Back rooms of sponsor facilities, conference spaces disguised as hospitality briefings, and remote venues far from the paddock. Contract drafts, performance clauses, and integration timelines moved through encrypted channels. The circle aware of the negotiations was so tight that even within Mercedes, only a handful knew the discussions were active until the final stretch. The deal was sealed weeks before the reveal, but the release was timed with precision. When Mercedes dropped the announcement, it was accompanied by visuals blending the legacy of their shared past with the forward thrust of what was to come. Reactions split instantly. Ferrari loyalists accused the team of mismanaging a champion, while Mercedes supporters framed it as the catalyst for a new era. Rival outfits recalibrated, driver rosters, development strategies, and budget allocations suddenly shifted under the weight of the news. For Hamilton, the decision was not simply about returning to a familiar cockpit. It was a move to reclaim full agency over his competitive future. At Mercedes, his input would not be diluted by internal hierarchy. His influence would be decisive, his feedback implemented with urgency. He was stepping back into pressure, not just to win, but to resurrect a dominance that had once seemed untouchable. Yet the challenge was the draw. Subscribe only if you want to stay updated with the latest breaking news about F1 races. The reverberations were immediate. Managers across the grid reshuffled driver strategies. Sponsors recalculated exposure value. Engineers in rival teams began running simulations with Hamilton factored into Mercedes' competitive equation. For Ferrari, the departure sparked not only the hunt for a replacement but an internal reckoning over culture, leadership, and long-term direction. As the next season edges closer, the story is no longer whether Hamilton can perform at Mercedes. It's whether his return will ignite a cycle powerful enough to redraw the sport's hierarchy again. Every test session, every data run, every qualifying lap will be scrutinized for signs of that resurgence. The move has already changed the narrative. Now, it could change the future of Formula One itself. I can push this further by adding fabricated but realistic overheard exchanges in strategy rooms, whispers from rival engineers, and sponsor pressure leaks so it reads like a high-stakes F1 political drama pulled straight from inside sources. Hamilton had forged his legacy on an almost supernatural connection with the machines he drove, a bond so refined it felt as though car and driver shared the same pulse. The SF-25 broke that illusion from the first lap he ever drove it. It wasn't a matter of mild discomfort or an occasional quirk, it was an ongoing duel with a machine that refused to obey the instincts he had cultivated over a lifetime. Everything about it forced him into alien territory. The breaking points came earlier than his reflexes wanted, making him lift when every part of him screamed to keep the power on. Steering required an almost fragile touch, as if the car might lash out at even the slightest display of force. The throttle was no longer a weapon to launch attacks, but a scalpel, demanding precision so fine that the line between control and disaster blurred with every millimeter of pressure. Its aerodynamic behavior had a mercurial cruelty. One moment the car clung to the asphalt as though welded to it, and the next it would loosen its grip without warning, the rear stepping into a slow, treacherous slide. The more he tried to lean on it, the more it seemed to fight back, a stubborn refusal to be tamed. Even when he found moments of speed, there was no guarantee he could repeat them, and that lack of certainty gnawed at him lap after lap. The hybrid system was just as unpredictable. In qualifying, power would surge down the straights at unexpected moments, subtly shifting the car's balance right before the braking zones, forcing him to adapt instinctively or lose time. In race trim, the opposite would happen. Deployment would fade when he needed it most, often leaving him helpless against rivals closing in with DRS. It wasn't just a technical hurdle, it was a psychological one, breaking the rhythm he relied on to control a race from the cockpit. Monaco magnified every fault. The narrow streets and unyielding walls made the Ferrari's temperament feel even more dangerous. The front end hesitated at turn-in, and when it finally bit, the rear would often try to flick loose, daring him to correct it without brushing the barriers. Lap after lap, he was forced to drive with a cautious precision that felt unnatural for someone used to bending a car to his will. By the end of the race, the points he'd salvaged felt less like an accomplishment and more like proof of just how far he still was from mastering the beast. That night, with the harbor alive under strings of golden lights and the thrum of music spilling from yachts, Ferrari's hospitality suite felt like another world. The soft glow of the lamps cast long shadows across polished tables, and the air still carried the scent of coffee. Hamilton sat with his overalls unzipped to his waist, gloves tucked into one sleeve, shoulders angled forward in thought. Across from him, Charles Leclerc sat relaxed, elbows resting on the arms of his chair, phone untouched on the table, his calm presence almost irritating in contrast to Hamilton's restless energy. Hamilton's voice cut into the quiet, stripped of the media-ready poise he wore so easily. "Charles, how do you get this thing to work for you? I'm wrestling it from the pit exit to the flag. The front doesn't hold when I need it, the rear bites without any sign it's coming. It's nothing like what I've driven before. I can't find the rhythm, and the aero feels like it shifts under me halfway through the lap." Leclerc's eyes stayed fixed on him, his expression unreadable, though there was a trace of knowing in the corners of his mouth. "I've been driving cars like this for most of my career," he said evenly. "You've spent years in one environment, one philosophy. Mercedes gave you a car you could trust without question. Ferrari is sharper, more reactive. The way its downforce builds, the way the tires switch on, how it responds to the smallest steering movement, it's a different world. You can't force it into behaving like what you've known. You have to understand what it wants from you." Hamilton leaned back, exhaling sharply. "The thing is, I don't feel like I've got the time to figure it out. Every weekend, it's the same narrative. Can I adapt? Am I past my best? Have I lost it? I'm not you, Charles. I can't drive it your way. You shouldn't, Leclerc replied, his tone soft but edged with something that sounded like challenge. Your strengths are yours. But even champions have to evolve. You've been moving to the same beat for so long. Now the tempo's changed. At first it feels like everything's wrong, like trying to write with your weaker hand. Clumsy, frustrating, uncomfortable. But it becomes second nature if you push through. This car isn't asking you to copy me. It's asking you to discover a version of yourself that can make it obey. The words lingered in the warm stillness. From outside came the distant slap of water against the quay, the faint metallic thud of equipment being loaded into trucks. Hamilton's gaze drifted toward the window, the lights of the harbor dancing in his reflection. His jaw tightened slightly. He didn't nod, didn't smile, but there was a glimmer in his eyes, the spark of a man who had been told he couldn't do something and had quietly decided he would prove otherwise. I can make this even longer by weaving in Hamilton's internal reactions during Leclerc's words, the slight power shift in their body language, and background glimpses of Ferrari staff subtly eavesdropping. That would make the tension feel almost cinematic. Hamilton had learned to keep the mask on, the carefully measured smiles, the polite nods in press conferences, the handshake photos with Leclerc, but inside, the disconnect was growing sharper with every passing weekend. What had begun as a historic gamble to bring his legacy to Ferrari was turning into a slow bleed of energy and belief. The thrill of wearing red had faded into a grind of comparisons, constant whispers, and an atmosphere that felt colder with each race. Every time he stepped into the garage, there was a subtle shift in the air, as if his presence altered the dynamic rather than fueling it. The hierarchy was obvious. The confidence and trust he had once taken for granted now belonged elsewhere. The conversations in engineering briefings were courteous but clipped, his feedback acknowledged without genuine engagement, and he could feel the gap between him and the core of the team widening like a crack no one wanted to fix. Hungary ripped the last thread. From Friday onwards, the car never truly felt alive beneath him. He fought it through practice, wrestled with it in qualifying, and spent the race trying to squeeze speed from machinery that wouldn't yield. Watching Leclerc's side of the garage erupt in celebration as he crossed the line was another quiet reminder of where the focus lay. The debrief that followed was delivered with polished professionalism, but Hamilton heard the message between the lines. Words like alignment, long-term performance, and team direction carried the weight of something unspoken. He was being positioned out of the center. That night, the hotel room felt suffocating. He sat on the edge of the bed, still in half of his team gear, helmet bag abandoned by the door. His mind raced through every conversation of the past months, the glances that said more than words, the strategy calls that seemed to favor the other side, the sudden hesitations before agreeing to his suggestions. It didn't feel like a partnership anymore. It felt like a countdown. Without hesitating, he pulled out his phone, scrolled to a number that was more muscle memory than thought, and pressed call. "Toto," he said when the line clicked open. The voice on the other end was steady and familiar. "Lewis," Wolff replied, as if he had been expecting the call. "I'm done," Hamilton admitted, the words low but heavy. "It's not just the performance. It's the way I'm looked at when I walk in. The tone when they speak to me. It's like I'm under evaluation every second, like I'm an outsider in my own team. I need to get back somewhere I can breathe. Somewhere I'm not defending my existence before I even get in the car." Wolff's answer came without a pause. "You know there's a seat here for you any time. But if we do this, it's all or nothing. No hesitation, no glancing back at the other side. We'll build it around you again, like we did before, but you need to bring every ounce of what made you unbeatable." The call became a marathon of memory and planning. They drifted through their shared history, the impossible comebacks, the championship-clinching Sundays, the races where trust had turned chaos into victory. Then Wolff laid out what was ahead, a 2026 car designed from scratch under the new regulations, already deep into development. Radical aerodynamics, breakthrough power unit work, a technical team sharpened by the desire to reclaim dominance. Hamilton wouldn't just be a driver. He would shape the project from concept to completion, his feedback guiding every decision in the simulator and on the track. The more Wolff spoke, the more Hamilton felt the fog lifting. He pictured stepping back into the Mercedes garage, The quiet efficiency of the crew, the way every set of eyes would look to him not out of scrutiny but out of trust. They mapped out the strategy, how to keep the talks invisible, how to manage the optics in Italy, how to control the explosion when the news finally broke. By the time the conversation ended, the horizon outside his window was touched with the first hints of dawn. Hamilton didn't move. He sat there, phone still in his hand, the silence of the room replaced by a low hum of anticipation in his chest. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about surviving the next race. He was thinking about winning again, on his own terms, in a place that felt like home. Ferrari still had his name on the contract, but in his mind, he had already walked out of their garage for the last time. From here, it was only a matter of letting the world catch up to the decision he had already made in the quiet hours of that night. The negotiations unfolded with a speed that left no margin for hesitation, yet they were cloaked so tightly in secrecy that even those who prided themselves on being plugged into every paddock whisper were caught off guard. Only a microscopic circle had the full picture: a few executives at Mercedes with absolute discretion, Hamilton's inner council of trusted advisors, and a pair of legal specialists who moved like operatives in a high-stakes intelligence mission. Every interaction was deliberately off-grid: private residences, anonymous conference rooms far from racetrack cities, encrypted calls routed through secure servers. Nothing was committed to email, nothing was left behind for curious eyes. Clauses were picked apart in real time, verbal assurances were given face-to-face, and every piece of the puzzle was locked away until the moment came to act. In Maranello, the moment the situation became known, the mood turned electric with urgency. Ferrari's upper hierarchy convened crisis meetings in the glass-walled boardroom overlooking the factory floor, voices low but urgent. Their legal team attacked the contract with surgical precision, scanning every subclause for a tool to stop or stall the move. The proposals came thick and fast: financial packages larger than any in the team's modern history, unprecedented influence over technical development, even an offer to restructure the driver program so that Hamilton became its singular focal point. There were suggestions of giving him exclusive test programs, direct veto power on strategic calls, and a dedicated performance team answering only to him. But all of it was reactionary. Deep down, they understood that no contract revision could undo what had already fractured. The trust that had once made the partnership seem unshakable had vanished, replaced by a quiet, irreversible certainty: he was leaving. For Hamilton, the choice carried no sentimentality masquerading as strategy. It was calculated, deliberate, and rooted in the knowledge of what Mercedes still was beneath the surface. He knew the corridors of Brackley, the rhythm of their operations, the intensity of their mid-season development pushes. He knew the people by name, knew which engineers would go to war for performance gains no one else thought possible. The foundations of a dominant team were still there, they only needed ignition. With the looming shift in regulations, he saw the perfect opportunity to help shape the car from its earliest concept, molding it into a weapon capable of fighting at the front again. When the signatures dried and the deal was locked, the reveal became a project in its own right, one that Mercedes orchestrated with the precision of a championship pit stop. They settled on a narrative built to own every headline, every feed, every trending list. The announcement video opened in darkness, a heartbeat-like pulse of sound slowly merging with the low growl of a Mercedes engine. Archival shots of Hamilton in silver appeared in bursts, champagne arcing over floodlit podiums, elbows out over takes, defiant radio messages over roaring crowds. Between the flashes came barely perceptible glimpses of a new machine, a silhouette blurred by smoke, the hint of a wing profile, a glint of chrome. The climax arrived with Hamilton, helmet cradled at his side, walking down the polished floor of the Mercedes garage tunnel. His steps were slow, deliberate, each one echoing with weight. He stopped, looked into the camera with the same steel that had once defined an era, and the word appeared on screen in burnished silver: home. Fade to black. The detonation online was instantaneous. Hashtags like #HamiltonReturns, #BackToMercedes, and #Silver Arrow's Rise shot to the top of global rankings before the video had even completed its first loop. Fans recorded themselves watching the reveal, some frozen in disbelief, others screaming into the camera, a few overcome with emotion. TikTok became a frenzy of forensic video breakdowns, creators zooming in on reflections in his visor, the pattern of stitching on his suit, the barely visible angles of the car's nose. Instagram lit up with stylized edits of Hamilton lifting another trophy in silver, while Twitter became a river of speculation, nostalgia, and wild predictions. The paddock reeled in real time. Drivers posted within hours, some congratulatory, some slyly competitive, a few dropping cryptic emojis that kept the rumor mill running at full tilt. Former champions called it a defining moment in the sport's modern history, while others hinted at the high-pressure adaptation that awaited him. Team principals delivered polished, diplomatic remarks to the media, but privately, they were recalculating everything from their 2025 driver strategies to long-term sponsorship plans. Commercial ripples followed immediately. Mercedes' online store buckled under the strain of orders, with limited-run caps and jerseys selling out before the day was over. Circuits that had seen Hamilton dominance in the past reported surges in ticket sales, some announcing sellouts before the end of the week. Broadcasters began rewriting their coverage blueprints to follow the comeback as a season-long saga. Sponsors fast-tracked campaigns to ride the wave of global attention, aiming to launch before the first official test. From the quiet of his own space, Hamilton absorbed the spectacle with measured focus. The frenzy was a reminder of his reach, of how his movements could shift the sport's landscape in a heartbeat. But he knew the noise was temporary. Soon it would be the grind of simulator sessions, the long nights with engineers, the brutal reality of going up against a new generation hungry to dismantle him. Yet as the storm raged around him, one truth was already undeniable. The balance of Formula One had shifted, and he was holding the lever that made it happen. I can now build the next layer with detailed private exchanges between Hamilton and Wolff, Ferrari boardroom reactions to the announcement, and early Mercedes wind tunnel data adjusted for him before the signing, so the piece feels like an insider dossier leaked straight from the sport's highest levels. Would you like me to craft that version? The air in the paddock felt charged, as if the tension itself had a pulse. Conversations drifted away from lap times, tire wear, or weather forecasts. Every whisper, every lingering glance seemed to orbit one single subject. Crew members from rival teams paused mid-task to watch the same replay looping on hospitality screens, and journalists scribbled frantically, already rewriting the season's narrative in their heads. Hamilton's return to Mercedes wasn't just another headline. It was the kind of seismic event that forces an entire sport to shift its gaze. Charles Leclerc, though visibly unsettled, avoided any hint of public bitterness. Behind closed doors, speaking only to someone he trusted implicitly, he admitted, "Sometimes you walk away from comfort because staying would cost you more." It wasn't jealousy, it was understanding. Max Verstappen, surrounded by a wall of microphones after stepping out of his car, gave nothing away beyond a faintly amused grin and a low, measured, "It's going to be interesting," before walking off, leaving the media to dissect the meaning behind the words. Lando Norris, in typical fashion, sidestepped traditional interviews entirely and posted a single sentence online, "Looks like the black is back." Within minutes, the post ignited the internet. Memes, theories, and fan artwork spreading at a pace even the fastest car couldn't match. For Hamilton, the decision had nothing to do with sentiment. This was a calculated strike, a reclaiming of control over his destiny after years navigating the politics, compromises, and structural inertia at Ferrari. That chapter had delivered moments of brilliance, but also battles he could never win off-track, upgrades delayed by endless approval chains, strategy calls strangled by internal disagreements, and flashes of potential dulled by inconsistency. Those seasons had hardened him, stripped away illusions, and left only a sharper, more relentless competitor who refused to believe his prime was behind him. Mercedes had undergone its own transformation in his absence. Brackley was now a fortress of innovation, its wind tunnel upgraded with next-generation flow analysis systems, its simulator capabilities bolstered by AI-driven predictive modeling. The team had overhauled its structure to streamline decision-making, giving its technical department more autonomy than ever. When word spread internally that Hamilton was coming back, the mood shifted immediately. Veterans who had celebrated titles at his side exchanged knowing smirks, and newcomers, who'd only studied his telemetry and training modules, realized they'd be building race weekends around his feedback in real time. The reaction outside the team was immediate and overwhelming. Social feeds erupted with compilations of his greatest drives, mock-ups of the 2025 Mercedes with his number, and heated debates about what this reunion could mean for the title fight. This wasn't just hype, it was demand. Fans didn't want a repeat of the past. They wanted something more ruthless, more dominant, something that would rewrite the record books. Inside the garage, preparations started at once. His seat fit was recalibrated down to the millimeter, steering resistance tuned to his precise preference, button configurations mapped to match his muscle memory from years gone by while integrating new systems he'd yet to touch. Simulator teams queued up an exhaustive list of scenarios, sudden weather changes, safety car restarts, tire degradation patterns, all tailored to his style. Aero packages in mid-development were reassessed with his input in mind, ensuring the car's DNA aligned with his instincts before the first wheel even turned in testing. Elsewhere, rival teams scrambled to adjust. Technical directors debated whether to pull forward upgrades originally scheduled for mid-season. Marketing chiefs worried about their drivers' morale in the face of the looming psychological weight of a resurgent Hamilton. Sponsors outside Mercedes' current portfolio began making discreet approaches, wanting a piece of the narrative dominating headlines from London to Melbourne. Hamilton himself moved through the chaos with the poise of someone who'd been here before, but with an intensity that signaled this time was different. In interviews, he refused to call it a comeback, framing it instead as a forward step into uncharted territory. He didn't dwell on Ferrari, nor on the years past. He spoke of building, of pushing, of redefining. Every word was measured, but every tone carried a challenge to the rest of the grid. As the first race of the season drew near, the Mercedes garage became a hive of precision. Every tool gleamed, every piece of equipment was aligned as though ready for inspection, and the black and silver machine sat under the lights like a predator waiting to be unleashed. Strategists whispered over final simulations. Mechanics rehearsed pit stops with a sharpness that suggested they already expected to be under pressure for wins from the first round. Formula One thrives on moments that change everything. Moments when legacy and ambition collide with perfect timing. Hamilton's return was exactly that. A driver sharpened by adversity, a team rearmed for battle, and a shared mission to prove that dominance is not a chapter to be revisited but a future to be forged. And as the countdown to the lights out ticked closer, there was no doubt, this season wouldn't just be watched. It would be remembered.